Hello everyone, welcome and welcome back to the channel. My name is Nini. I am a traditional and digital artist, and I just finished participating in my first ever art fight. I first heard about Art Fight last year in 2024 with all of the drama that was going on back then. I thought that the game looked really interesting and that I might have fun participating in it. Plus the team names back then were really pretty. Before beginning, I thought that it might be a good idea to give myself some goals for this event so that I can use it as a way to improve my digital art skills. My goals for Art Fight were to experiment with brushes and assets in Clip Studio Paint, make at least 10 pieces, spend around 3 hours on each piece, and to just have fun. Additionally, since I wanted to complete 10 pieces, I didn't focus too much on line art and instead focused on finding a new coloring/rendering style using different brushes that I found in the Clip Studio Paint asset store. I think that I managed to meet my goals and even exceed some, so without further ado, let's get on to our first attack. So before Art Fight even begins, users are allowed to bookmark characters that they would like to draw during the event. This first character, Muscle Bear, was the very first character that I bookmarked. I thought that the concept was really adorable and that it would give me some practice drawing buff guys. Disco Hest, the original artist, describes this character as a guy whose entire personality is training, gym rat all day every day, chugging protein shakes and making gains. Since there isn't very much of a description, I did have a few thoughts of what this character might be like. I imagine that he prefers to go to public gyms rather than work out at home in order to help newbies make gains themselves, and he wears a teddy bear head to help people be more comfortable to approach him to ask for help. And of course he does it all for free because he just enjoys sharing his passion with others. I have drawn a few buff boys in the past, but this is the first time in a while, so I did struggle with it a bit. The arm lifting the dumbbell is a bit too low, which makes his arm look much longer than I intended. I probably should have looked up a reference for the pose that I wanted, or just make my own reference photo, but I guess I wasn't really thinking at the time and got a bit too hasty. Coloring this was a little bit of a nightmare as well. The reference photo for this character was really just a little doodle with no colors to reference, so I decided to come up with colors on the spot. The bear head very much gave me Winnie the Pooh vibes, so I decided to base the colors off of red and yellow. The shading of the skin really got to me in the beginning, but I think that I managed to pull through. As this was my first piece in the event, I didn't experiment too much with the rendering and trying out different brushes. I just stuck to my usual rendering methods. I was originally going to make a complete gym background for this piece, but I got frustrated with it and just decided to use a 3D model of dumbbells, which I did the line art for, but you can hardly see because it's blocked by the character. Since the challenge ended, I did find a 3D asset that matches the background that I was trying to draw, so I saved it for use in the future. I also used a manga asset around the face to try to give Muscle Bear a more intense look. As they say, no pain, no gain. One thing that I really liked about this event is that it got me to draw things that I don't normally think of drawing, for example, dumbbells. Now my favorites page in the Clip Studio Asset Store is full of 3D models, brushes, and materials that I would have never thought to use before. There are a few things that I would change if I was trying to complete this work, proportions being number one, but the main goal of this challenge was to not stress too much about the details, so I decided to move on. The only thing that I really experimented with was using the 3D model for the background. Overall, I loved drawing this character, and I hope that the original artist liked it too. This next artwork was a revenge for the very first attack that I received, which was from the artist Patchwork Angel. Tizzy is a homebody who just wants to be with her plants and read in a cozy corner. She enjoys spending time at cafes or just sleeping the day away in her bed full of pillows. This character kind of reminded me of my own character Kendall, but in a fox form. I knew exactly what pose I wanted to draw her in when I saw her for the first time. For some reason, I hyper-focused on the cafe aspect of her character description and decided to make her a part-timer at a cafe, with her holding a pie getting ready to put it into a display case. Maybe it was the apron, I don't really know, but I do know that I loved coloring her outfit. Coloring and rendering for this character was much simpler than Muscle Bear, mostly because I didn't have to choose the colors myself. I loved working on Tizzy's outfit. I used the blue from her belt to do the shadows on the green dress, and it just did a wonderful job at making the green stand out even more. I once again stuck to my guns when rendering, and I found the process very satisfying. Since I made it so that she's in a cafe, I wanted to try doing some kind of cafe wall for the background, but it didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted. It looks a bit incomplete in my opinion. I did try to add this pattern to the wall to make it more interesting, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Since I finished this, I saved a few 3D cafe assets to use in the future so that I don't have this problem again. Looking at the art now, I do wish I had spent a little bit more time on this one. I probably could have sent in just the character without the background or with a simple background. Overall, I think that it still turned out pretty nicely and Patchwork Angel seemed to really like it. What's done is done and we're moving on to the next one. This next one was a game changer for my digital process moving forward in this event. This character was another one that I had saved before the challenge began. I think that the design is very colorful and full of whimsy. Starly is a Lost Jester _14 self-insert into the Amazing Digital Circus, which is an indie animated series on YouTube made by Glitch Productions. I thought that was really neat because I'm also a fan of that series. Because I have background knowledge of the premise of the Amazing Digital Circus, I decided to give Starly a very apprehensive facial expression and body language. I wanted it to look as if he just arrived to the circus and is worried about what is to come. I also made the angle so that we're looking up towards Starly, hopefully adding to that apprehensive feeling. I thought that the idea of having stretchy, spring-like arms was really cool, so I found a brush in Clip Studio Paint that does dual lines to make the line art process a bit easier. I did make a slight change to his design by accident. In the reference photo, it doesn't look like his head is attached to his body. I guess it's not overly noticeable because of the frilly thing around his neck, which really adds to the circus vibe anyways. For this character, I decided to experiment with using the lasso tool and bucket tool to quickly fill in larger portions of the flat color layer. I used to avoid using this strategy because I'm a painter at heart, so it kind of felt like cheating to me. But let me tell you, once I started using it, things became so much easier. Doing the base colors takes less time, and I can change the color of the selected area easily if I needed to. I then used my regular painting brush to do the rest of the rendering. For the background, I decided to have some of those foam blocks that I'm sure a lot of us used to climb as kids. I also added the stripes of a circus tent to give more hint as to where this character is. I like the way that I did the perspective for the background, kind of stretching and curving the lines of the blocks to make the angle a little bit more intense rather than having the blocks just be straight. I really liked working on this character, and from their comment, the original artist really liked it too. I'm very happy that I managed to find a way to make my drawing process more efficient. This next one is definitely a bit odd compared to the rest. Bread is just a sentient piece of bread, and dreams of being the best slice of bread to ever be eaten. This was another one that I had saved prior to the art fight actually beginning, just because of how odd of a character it is. The original artist, by_Suzerain, also encouraged customization of this piece of sentient bread, which instantly made me want to draw this character as something truly delicious. I hope that this isn't too weird and that other people might also like to eat this kind of thing, but I decided to make this bread into an open-faced breakfast sandwich with a sunny-side-up fried egg, lettuce, tomato, cooked lunch meat, and some toast. To me, this is the perfect breakfast sandwich combo. Using the same lasso and bucket tool technique from the last piece, I was able to quickly fill in the flat colors and even some of the highlights. I also tried using gradients in this piece, which made shading so much easier. Instead of using my regular painting brush for rendering, I used the Milli pen, which makes it so that the colors aren't blending like they normally do with my regular painting brush. I just wanted to try a different brush to experiment with for painting, and I actually think that it worked out for this piece. For the other elements, I decided to add a salt shaker in case you need it, and a mug of something warm to drink to start off the day. Although I did kind of forget to add the steam that would indicate it as being warm, I also added some sparkly elements using a new brush from the asset store. I really enjoyed making this piece, and by_Suzerain also liked it. This next one is going to be pretty short since it took me under an hour to do. The artist, I have no idea how to even begin to pronounce their name, didn't leave a description of the character, but based off of the character's name, I'm guessing that this is their persona. I really enjoyed the sketchy ink look of the reference photo, so I decided to bust out the dry ink pen that I used in one of my past videos to kind of match it. I really enjoy how I did their expression, and I really enjoy the posing that I did for them. I kind of just drew them sitting in some grass. Someone left a comment that it kind of gave a lino cut feeling, and I absolutely agree. I really enjoyed this whole process, and the original artist liked it too, so I count that as a win. Most of the process for this next one was done on stream, so if you want to go watch that, it's up on my channel. This is another one that I saved before Art Fight started this year. Tin Tea Time is, well, Tin Tea Time, as in this is the original artist's persona. There isn't very much of a character description or background information, so I'll kind of just describe what I think is going on with this character. From the design, I got the feeling that this was a gentle and curious prince fellow who goes on many adventures. The original artist streams on Twitch, and on Instagram they post the thumbnails for their streams, which shows their persona and the different games they play. So I wanted to draw him kind of relaxing after coming back from an adventure and just watching the sunset. I experimented quite a bit with the background of this piece, using an IV brush that I found in the Clip Studio Paint asset store, and then using a clipping mask and the simple watercolor brush to give a more textured feeling to the leaves, and to just add to the sunset glow effect. For the finishing touches, I used this dappled sunlight brush, and then covered the whole piece with this line texture brush, and lowered the opacity to give the entire piece even more texture. I really liked using this method, so you'll see me doing this final part for the rest of the pieces in this event. This piece turned out so lovely, and Tin Tea Time seemed to really like it too. And with that, let's move on to the next character. I really struggled on this next one, but before that, I'll give a little bit of background on this character. One of the features of the Art Fight website is that you can add tags to your character pages, which makes it easier for people to search for characters with specific traits such as anthro, human, etc. From the tags of this character, I'm guessing that this is an Alien Stage OC, but the problem is that I've never seen Alien Stage, and I didn't even think to look it up before starting. Also, I had downloaded the character sheet for this character, but it turns out that there were two character sheets, and that other character sheet was the one that had more information about this character, and I didn't see it until I was already about to submit the attack. So, Uju was supposed to be a carefree and smiley character that is physically weak and has eye bags, but I accidentally made them look like this love child of Mizuki and Tomoe from Kamisama Kiss. So that's my fault, and I should have paid more attention. I tried to use a 3D model at the beginning of this piece, but as you can see, I ended up barely using it for the facial proportions and just figured things out the usual way. I think that I've learned that the 3D character models are only really good for general body posing rather than actual proportions. I really enjoy Uju's outfit. The exposed shoulder look was really nice, so I made sure that the illustration was zoomed out enough to help highlight that aspect. The extra long sleeves were also really cute, so I made it so that Uju is kind of lifting up their hand to cover their face, and their sleeve is kind of in the way. For the background, I did try to make it detailed. I downloaded this 3D model of a bridge and drew a scene of a beautiful little pond area with cherry blossoms, but I got really frustrated and decided to scrap it entirely. Which is such a shame, because if I was doing a serious rendered piece of art, I know that I could absolutely pull this kind of background off. But alas, I was trying to keep my goals in mind to try not to get too deep into the details, which includes backgrounds. I tried a few pattern brushes before settling on this golden cloud brush that looked pretty decent and matched this character's color palette. I did try to add the eye bags towards the end, but I decided not to since I was using the reference that didn't have the eye bags, so my art was still totally valid. The end result was pretty alright. I was very glad to be done with this one and move on to the next attack. Storm Racer is a rebellious Pegasus who loves flying way too fast and sometimes gets into accidents because of it. I haven't drawn a My Little Pony character in a long time, so I thought that this would be a great opportunity for me. I was very much a My Little Pony / Transformers Prime kid, and I used to own quite a bit of MLP merch when I was in elementary and middle school. I very much don't like the new generation designs, so I stopped being as invested in it as I used to be, but this was pretty refreshing. I really enjoyed the color palette that the original artist used. It's really inspiring me to get more saturated with my colors moving forward. I love all of the little patches of color strewn across Storm Racer's coat, which makes for a truly unique pony design. I also really enjoy all of the little piercings that Storm Racer has, although I don't think that they came across very well in my drawing. I decided to go with this scene where Storm Racer is flying above some clouds, chasing a storm if you will. It's been quite a while since I've drawn anything with wings, so this was a very interesting way to get back into it. I think that it turned out okay. I went with a very soft and warm color palette for the clouds to make the color palette of the characters stand out a bit more and to make it look like the calm before the storm. I used a gradient map to make the art even warmer, and that's pretty much it. I really enjoyed making this piece. The overall warmness is just so wonderful, and it's kind of making me want to sketch some more My Little Pony characters. I do wish that I had made the left front leg straight rather than the right one, just so that it looks a bit more natural, and the hair needs a little bit more rendering, but I'm not going to dwell on it too much, and we're moving on. The artist liked it, by the way. This next one was one of my favorites to work on. Crow is a child of wealthy aristocrats living in a world of magic where you can harm someone as long as you know their name and face. As such, people wear masks to protect their identity. However, Crow is bored of a monotonous life and craves excitement. I thought that this premise was so cool and the mask looked pretty neat, so I knew that I had to draw this character. This was also a revenge attack for this piece of art. This was another attack that was streamed on YouTube. I feel like this one took a lot longer than it did. I struggled a bit at the beginning of this piece. I had tried to use a new brush that does this interesting wobble effect, but it didn't really work for my coloring process, so I switched back to my regular G pen and saved the wobble brush for another time. It was when I was doing the line art that I had this thought that this character kind of reminded me of James from Team Rocket. Maybe it's the hair, but I'm not really sure. But it made me a lot more invested in drawing this character. I kind of wanted to go for this dark magic kind of look following the purple and blue color palette from the reference picture. I also kind of wanted to make it look like Crow was performing some kind of magic. I spent a lot longer on the line art than I should have. I struggled quite a bit on the hand that is lifted towards the viewer, only for it to get partially covered up towards the end. I think that my favorite part of this piece was getting to render the feathers attached to the neck piece. That kind of rendering really just allows me to turn off my brain and go with the flow. I basically used the true colors from the reference photo as the highlights and went from there. And can I just say, I love Crow's outfit. He's kind of got a ballet dancer vibe going on. It kind of gives me Princess Tutu vibes. For the background, I used a nighttime gradient, watercolor brush, and a star brush to create an enchanting night sky. Since this character's name is Crow, I decided to add some feathers to the foreground and background using this feather brush that I found in the Clip Studio Paint asset store. Maybe these feathers can be a part of his magic. Who knows, it's all up for interpretation. At the end, I really did think that I spent 6 hours on this, but in reality, I spent around 4 hours on it, which isn't bad at all. I'm really proud of how it turned out, and the original artist seemed to like it too. I had great ambitions for this next character, but I sadly did not meet my own expectations. I mean, it still looks nice, but if I had the chance to redo this one, there would definitely be a few things that I would change. This next character is the persona of Prim-Me. According to her lore, Primara was once a star that wandered the cosmos but became interested in Earth and decided to interact with its people. And she wears her purple sunglasses because of her star eyes that cause everything around her to look brighter. Now this lore is really cool and all, but I must have completely missed it when I was making this piece. I just thought that the character design was really cool, but the lore makes her even cooler. I didn't get very adventurous with this one. The proportions of her face were pissing me off, so I just wanted to finish this piece fast. Of course, I could have just redrawn the pose, but remember that one of the goals was to have fun and spend less time on line art, so I just pushed through to the end. The color palette for this character gave me so much joy though. For some reason, I've really been enjoying the warmer colors recently, even though I've always been into cooler colors. The rendering was very therapeutic and kind of made up for how I felt about this piece. I didn't do much for the background. I just used this flower stamp and lowered the opacity. At the end, I used a gradient map to make things a bit more pink, and that's it. I'm glad that it came out okay, even though I fought with it a bit, and the original artist seemed to like it too. Maybe I'll make another illustration of this character to redeem myself in the future. So this next character is actually from a YouTuber that I watch. During Art Fight, I was watching a few artists doing streams of their attacks. When I saw that Skynix Art was doing Art Fight, I decided that I absolutely had to attack him. I started watching his videos sometime earlier this year, and he's a really great creator and comic artist. Since I watched his 10 artists create a comic together video, I decided to draw one of his characters from that video, Rouge. Now, I did break the line art rule for this one only because it got too much into the groove of things and really liked the idea that I had going. For this attack, I wanted to draw Rouge enjoying a warm sunny day under the shade of a tree and looking up towards the sky. It's kind of difficult to draw things from the top looking down, so I wanted to make sure that the line art was strong enough to help convey the angle that I wanted. Of course, that does turn out to be a waste of time because I figure out that I can just blur certain parts of the character to make it look further away. The orange and teal color palette really spoke to me, so I decided to make the background different shades of green grass. I found this pretty nice grass brush that changes colors to add even more texture than just a monocolor brush. I also added a layer of blue shadow to give the illusion of being underneath some tree branches. The rendering for this piece was so simple and relaxing. I feel like this is really using all of the skills and techniques that I've gained during this whole event, and I'm really proud of myself. I think that rendering the goggles was my favorite part, and after rendering, I do play around with the lighting effects using dappled light and some particle brushes. Then I added a tree branch in the foreground because I felt like it was necessary for the perspective. At the end, I blurred some of the edges to make the main focus of this piece Rouge's face, and that's it. I'm really proud of how it turned out. If you haven't already, you guys should definitely go check out Skynix's channel. You won't regret it. Let's move on to the next one. This next one was a revenge for this lovely piece of art of my character Bluestar and is also pretty short. Smiley can only be described as silly, playful, and hyper. This was kind of an interim piece so that I could procrastinate and avoid working on other attacks. I decided to experiment with different textured ink brushes for this one, which you could definitely see during the beginning. The coloring was very simple with black and white as the main colors, with some blue-gray for shading. I added these two little spirit cats just to add some more visual elements to the piece, and also just because I love cats. Now I was channeling a little bit of orb energy by adding these super saturated streaks of color for more contrast. I really like how it turned out, and the original artist liked it as well. Cirrus is an air genasi originally made for a D&D campaign. They love singing sappy songs and avoiding their problems until they can't anymore. Out of all of the artworks that I did for this year's art fight, this was my absolute favorite to work on. I just absolutely love their character design. I think the color palette is very pleasing to the eye, and drawing this type of character is right up my alley, so I had pretty much no trouble with it at all. And I actually finished this one up during the last stream that I did for Art Fight, which was fun because I got to interact with you guys as I finished up my last few attacks. For the pose, I kind of just wanted to have them chilling and not doing too much. The line art might be a bit messier for this one because I was doing this the day before Art Fight ended, but I still really like it. I used that double line brush again to do the jewelry, and it's honestly such a nice brush. I'm glad that I decided to experiment with these artworks. There isn't very much to say for the coloring part. I just used the same techniques that I used for most of these drawings, although I did notice that in some parts of the hair, they were transparent because of the blur tool that I used to blend the colors, but I just decided to leave it as it is. Maybe it gives off a little bit of a cloud-like semi-translucent look? I don't really know. I was looking at the character reference sheet again, and I kind of want to draw them again, but this time I want to show off their heels. The heel design is everything, and I'm kind of mad that I didn't think to include them. Maybe next time though. For the background, I just used a gradient, and then I found this image asset in the asset store that I played with a little. I duplicated the line art layer and gave it a glowy effect. I also added a glowy effect around Cirrus to help them stand out from the background a bit more. It was so much fun working on this character. They're just so freaking pretty. Now let's move on to the next piece of art that I procrastinated on and ended up taking over 10 hours to complete. So I've been watching Ren Spirit art for quite a while now. It's definitely been more than 3 years at this point. She's the one who taught me how to render art digitally and how to use Abyss Paint X properly. I still love using the graphite brush to color in Abyss Paint X because of her. So when I found out that she was going to be joining Art Fight for the first time, I knew that I absolutely had to draw one of her characters. I've drawn her character Moriko before in my last sketchbook, but I've never done a fully realized piece for one of her characters, so this was the perfect opportunity to do that. So initially I wanted to draw Moriko belting out a song during karaoke, and Masaki and Sato would be in the background looking through a songbook waiting for their turn. And I almost completed the line art for it, but for some reason I decided that this just wasn't working. I couldn't figure out the angle or the placement of things and characters in the room, so I decided to completely scrap that first idea and instead make a full cafe scene with not just one character, but all of her main characters, excluding Koji because he's a kid. Struggling with one character just wasn't enough for my masochistic brain. I needed to struggle with all of them, and I loved it. I searched the Clip Studio asset store for a 3D model of a cafe seating area, chose the angle that I wanted, and got to work. This part was just using the line and curve line tool to trace the model to use for line art. After that, I can't change the angle because I refuse to do the line art again. I decided to forego using 3D models for the characters because I feel like the 3D models don't really match my style of drawing, for characters at least. I think that the only character that I struggled with for this whole piece was Kaisen, just because of the way that I positioned him. I hated having to work on his legs. Because this is such a complicated piece, I stuck to my goal of not focusing too much on the line art. I did struggle quite a bit with the hands as always, and I accidentally gave Akemi a Lego hand, but it's okay, because my main focus was making the overall piece look really nice and warm. All of Ren's characters are so well thought out and go so well together as a group. All of them are around college age and are pretty close friends. Masaki is the main one that Ren seems to draw and is so adorable. He is a part-time florist and a botany/floriculture student who is sweet, but kind of a pushover. He's almost always smiling and is a little bit clumsy, but always puts his heart into everything that he does. Sato is Masaki's cousin. She's an 18-year-old confectioner working at her family's business. She loves making sweet treats but doesn't like sweet things herself. She's sweet but headstrong and stubborn. She's also dating Akemi. Akemi is a visual communication design student who is a morning person but also a caffeine addict. He's often the peacemaker between Kaisen and Sato and likes to support people behind the scenes instead of being in the spotlight. Something that was rather cute that I completely missed when I was doing this illustration is that Sato and Akemi share ear piercings. I just thought that that was such a cute couple idea. Kaisen is 24 and works full-time at a plant nursery. He's more of the tsundere type and often gets lovingly teased by the other characters. He's a bit directionally challenged and gets lost pretty often, which I can absolutely relate to. Moriko is my favorite of Ren's characters. She's a 19-year-old design student who's very bright and energetic. She's very empathetic, but is seen laughing and smiling most of the time. She also loves to go fast and rides a motorbike, which I thought was really cool. Maybe I'll draw her riding one in the future? She's best friends with Sato and goes to the same university as Masaki and Akemi. I think that I captured their personalities pretty well. Everyone is doing something different in this piece. Akemi showed up first and already has his cup of coffee. Moriko is excitedly showing Sato a video on her phone, which, if you zoom in, is actually Renspire Art's VTuber model. Kaisen is kind of teasing Moriko about her antics, while Masaki is trying to get the waiter's attention so that the group can order. I decided to have them about to order because I was a bit lazy and didn't want to have to draw all the different foods on the table, but I think that it worked out in the end. The whole scene is towards the end of the day after classes have ended, so there's lots of warm sunlight filtering through the cafe windows. I really enjoy how this piece as a whole came out in the end. It is a lot more complicated than I had originally planned, but I don't really mind it. If there was one thing that I could change about it, it would be the line art. I usually have line art on a multiply layer, but that means if you don't do the base colors properly, some of the original color will remain, which is why you see some blue bits in the line art, but that's neither here nor there. The best thing about all of this is that Renspire Art herself left a comment on this work, and I'm gonna print it out and stick it in my sketchbook. Now, you would think that this would be the final piece and be the big finale. However, I was still very much in a drawing mood, and there were still 8 hours left until the event was over, so I decided to do 3 more characters. Now, they are all sketch quality, so the time lapses aren't long at all, but I'm still proud of them nonetheless. I also did all of them between midnight and 3 a.m. on the final day. Since the time lapses are so short, I won't do any talking, so enjoy the rest of the video. And that's the end of my first year doing Art Fight. I really enjoyed being a part of this event. I feel like I've grown as an artist. It was really cool getting to draw so many different characters, and it was really cool seeing my own characters drawn in different styles. I had a thought that if I do it again next year, I might try to do animation so that I can improve my animation skills, but we'll see. I just wanted to give a big thank you to everyone that drew my characters. I love them all, and I love you all. Let me know which one of these illustrations was your favorite in the comments below. So that's the end of the video. If you like this content, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and maybe following me on my socials. And I will see you all next time. Goodbye!